Hi everyone, I hope you are well. This is our Intro to ABA discussion, Week 6, Class 7. Today we'll be going over behavior interventions. More specifically, we will be covering functions of behavior, competing pathways diagram, and prevent, replace, and respond strategies for responding to behaviors. So first, let's review functions of behavior. So we know that there are two types of functions of behavior. So one is to get or obtain something, and the other is to avoid or escape something. So common things that a child or an adult may want to get or obtain includes an attention, items that are tangible, activities, automatic reinforcement, and sensory stimulation. Common activities that some children may want to avoid or escape include work, sensory overload, transition, social situations, and sensory stimulation. So next, let's look at a competing pathways diagram. So as a review, within our competing pathways diagram, we see the three-term contingencies, so antecedent, problem, behavior, and consequence. So as a review, an antecedent refers to the stimuli or activity that occurs just before a child exhibits the behavior. In some cases, the antecedent is also the root cause of the behavior for the child. And then problem behavior is the behavior that occurs after the antecedent, and consequence refers to the event or consequence that follows behavior. So then what the competing pathways describes is alternative and desired behavior. Alternative behavior is a short-term goal. So it is a more socially acceptable behavior that we use to replace the problem behavior and allows the student to have the same consequence. However, our long-term goal is to have the student exhibit the desirable behavior, which also leads to the natural consequence that also serves as the same function of the behavior. So let's look at an example to really understand what all of this means. So as an example, we're going to be talking about a student named Liam. So Liam has had trouble using the escalator. So in this competing pathways diagram example, we also have the setting event. So some of the setting events for Liam is that he has anxiety regarding riding escalators. Parents are stressed due to grandmother's poor health condition, and Liam has experienced a history of negative reinforcement for problem behavior due mostly to riding escalators. So now let's look at the antecedent. So a trigger for Liam may be an escalator is in close proximity, or he may be asked by his parents to get on the escalator. And as a result, he exhibits these problem behaviors: verbal protest, screaming and crying, physical resistance. And as a consequence, parents take Liam to use the stairs or the elevator, or they carry Liam during the escalator ride. And as a result, he gets to avoid and escape the activity that he finds very aversive. So now let's look at first the alternative replacement behavior. So here, the alternative replacement behavior is Liam uses appropriate words to ask for a break. So this replacement behavior is better than the problem behavior because it's more socially acceptable, and it's teaching Liam how to appropriately request for his needs. So this is the short-term goal. However, long-term, we want Liam to calmly ride the escalator. And by riding the escalator, he can get verbal praise, access to preferred items, and also he can escape the activity after he finishes going up the escalator, because then if he goes up, then it's done. So that's another way he, in a way, is escaping and also gaining positive reinforcements. So then for your activity for this discussion this week, you're going to be looking at different examples of students' problem behaviors and coming up with your own competing pathways diagram, as well as implementing strategies to help address the behaviors. So let's look at this first vignette. So in vignette 1, Alex is a 7-year-old first grader in Miss Bell's class in a non-public school. Miss Bell has asked for help for Alex because he has been running away several times a day. She tells you that he will run outside the classroom without getting permission to leave, and usually stays outside anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes before coming back inside. She says that this occurs most often during the morning academic activities, math and reading, and rarely happens during lunch, PE, or free time. So let's break down what's happening with Alex's behaviors using the 3-term contingency. So as an antecedent, when Alex is asked to do a math or reading activity, as his behavior, he elopes from the classroom, and then as a consequence, Alex escapes the math or reading activity. So as a summary statement, we can say, when directed to work on math or reading, Alex elopes from the classroom in order to escape the activity. And as a baseline, Alex elopes during morning math and reading instruction 1 to 2 times a day. So now let's think about some strategies we can use to address Alex's behavior. So for your assignment 2, you'll be filling out prevent, replace, and respond. So for preventing problem behavior, so we want to prevent problem behavior from needing to occur in the first place. So when we're thinking about preventing behavior, you can ask yourself these questions. 1, how can we prevent the student from needing to engage in the problem behavior? 2, how can we make the problem behavior irrelevant? And 3, how can we avoid the problem context? Next, we will need to think about different ways to replace the behavior. So teach an alternative behavior to replace the problem behavior. So a question you can think about is, what behaviors can we teach that serve the same function as the problem behavior but are more appropriate? How do we teach these? And then finally, for the third column, respond, how do we plan to respond to student behavior? So a question to think about is, how do we respond to positive behavior with reinforcement? How do we respond to negative behavior without reinforcement? Okay, so now when thinking back about the scenario, there's multiple of correct answers for how we can address Alex's behavior. I'm just going to go over a few examples. So let's start with prevent. So one thing that we could do to prevent the behavior is provide more frequent access to breaks at regular times. Alex may need more frequent breaks or breaks at regular intervals in order to be successful in his class. Another way we can prevent the problem behavior is to shorten the math and reading assignments. So maybe the math and reading assignments might be overwhelming and challenging for Alex. So sometimes it's the length of the activity or the number of steps that causes issues. So if Alex can get started with the math and reading task without problem behavior, but tends to get more and more frustrated as the time gets longer, it may be helpful to shorten the task into smaller sessions with breaks in between. So these are 2 examples for ways to prevent the behavior. However, there's a lot more strategies you can use. So next, let's look at replace. So 2 ways we can replace the behavior. First is that Alex could use a break card. So Alex can turn in a break card when he wants to escape the assignment. So when you start this intervention, make sure you give Alex a break every time he requests it. The reason why is that you need to build and shape the skill first, then and only then can you work on limiting it. You need to get Alex's buy-in, and you need to sell him on this new replacement behavior. And that goes similarly with a verbal request. So verbal request works similar to the break card. Alex can be given some sentence starters to use to verbally request for a break. And then again, at the very beginning, when you're teaching the skill, you'll want to reinforce Alex with a break each time he requests it. So that leads us into our respond. So even though it's not listed here, Alex can gain a break every time that he requests it. So that is a way to respond and give Alex a reward. Another way that can be appropriate responses is you can use a token economy. So each time Alex appropriately requests a break, he can get a token that he can use for a preferred reward. So for example, maybe over time, if Alex gains 10 tokens, then he can get a prize or he can get a longer break. But usually you want to make sure that you know what Alex prefers as rewards and get a variety. That way it'll still be a good enough reinforcement for him to carry out the behavior. Another way to respond is to provide verbal praise when Alex appropriately asks for a break. So this way he is getting positive attention as well. So when you are doing this assignment, I want you to think of other ways that you can provide positive reinforcement, and how would you respond if perhaps Alex was not implementing the alternative behavior. So for example, maybe Alex elopes from the classroom again. So in that case, maybe he does not get to escape the task. You still expect him to work on it, and then once he appropriately asks for a break, then he can receive the break. So then next, what we're going to do is fill out the competing pathways diagram. So in this vignette, we weren't given the setting event. So, and whoops, I just noticed a typo there. But setting event. So in this case, you would not need to fill it out. So the antecedent, Alex has presented a math or reading task. Problem behavior, Alex elopes from the classroom for 5 to 10 minutes. And in an earlier slide, we said that this happened 1 to 2 times throughout the day. The consequence and function is that he avoids or escapes the math or reading activity. So then let's think of an alternative behavior. So maybe an alternative behavior is that Alex will present a break card, and that will have the consequence of allowing him to escape the math or reading activity. However, our long-term goal is that Alex will complete his math or reading activity, and then as a natural consequence, Alex will naturally escape the activity by completing it. Something else that we can add to the consequence and function is that he'll receive verbal praise. He may get better grades in school, because that could also be a reward for him. He can also continue to get prizes. So you can add more to the consequence function column. So on your own, you'll be working on vignette 2. So in vignette 2, Max is a 9-year-old third grade student in Miss K's class. Max has a diagnosis of ASD and spends most of his time in Miss K's classroom with 6 other students with developmental disabilities. Miss K has asked for help because Max has started throwing toys at other students during playtime. When Miss K or an aide gives Max a toy to play with, he throws a toy at the other student who may be doing classwork or playing with their own toys. Miss K says this happens several times a day. So when you're going through your assignment, you'll first think about what is the antecedent, what is the behavior, and what is the consequence. Are you able to create a summary statement of what is occurring with Max? So, for example, when given a toy during playtime, Max throws the toy at peers in the classroom. Then the peers look at or yell at Max. So then in this case, we know that Max is likely gaining attention, obtaining attention as the consequence or function of his behavior. So our summary statement could be, during playtime, Max throws toys at peers in order to gain peer attention. And then baseline, Max throws toys at a rate of 15 throws per hour during playtime. So then on your own, you'll be using that information to fill out a competing pathways diagram. Again, we weren't really given information on the setting event, so you do not need to fill that out. And then after that, you'll be creating your own prevent, replace, and respond strategies. So when you're thinking about prevent strategies, think about how can we eliminate or modify antecedents. For replace, how can we teach alternative behavior? And how can we teach the desired behavior? For respond, how can we reinforce the alternative or desired behavior? And how can we respond to or redirect the problem behavior? So practicing this assignment will really help you with your assignment 2, because you're going to need to come up with a bunch of different prevent, replace, and respond strategies in order to address different scenarios. And that's all. So if you want to talk about your assignment or these activities, feel free to come into my office hours, and I will be able to work with you then and support you with your assignments. I hope you all have a great day.